Hello and welcome to this edition of Tech Talk. This is where we bring technical experts from Cisco to share their insights on specific topics selectively chosen based on most common conversation themes on our technology area in community. It's an effort to share valuable insights from Cisco experts on those popular themes. We hope you like it. My name is Satish Chandran and I'm the community manager at Cisco. And today our topic for discussion will be understanding CUCM DB replication runtime state. Our expert joining me today is Harmit Singh, a technical leader with Cisco High Touch Technical Services, that's HTTS, based in India, with broad experience in Cisco Unified Communications infrastructure. He has close to 10 years of experience working with large enterprise as well as service provider networks. He also holds a CCI certification in voice, Red Hat, and VMware certifications. Welcome, Harmit.
Thanks, Satish. Pleasure being here.
Today, Harmit will talk about database replication CLI commands and status messages in CUCM and Linux appliance-based models, some best practices on when to use these commands, database-related improvements seen in CUCM version 9, and finally, we'll take some questions picked from community. So with that in mind, Harmit, can you tell us what are some of the most common situations in your experience that can break DB replication?
Sure, Satish. So we've got a range of problems that come up with respect to DB replication. I've seen a whole lot of them, but what I've done is I've taken some of the most common ones and listed them out for us here. The primary one that stands out is connectivity issue between the call manager nodes. The second would be any host file mismatch between the publisher and its subscribers can also break down replication. Third would be any problem with the UDP port 8500, which is actually used by your cluster manager service. Moving on, a very critical one, which is DNS. Most people tend to overlook this. A lot of times what happens is people would go and do their IP addressing change and forget to update the DNS servers with the respective change. So forward and reverse lookup is extremely critical for DB replication to set up correctly. Moving on, another critical point would be your time server, your NTP server. If your call manager server is not pointing to an NTP and there's a time difference of 15 minutes or more between your publisher and your subscribers, you are likely to see DB replication to go down. Two possibilities here. The publisher could be ahead by 15 minutes as opposed to the subscribers. What that would result in is the publisher sending data to the subscriber, but the subscriber leading to a delay because it has not reached that particular timestamp yet. This is actually working as a design, however, it is not a desired result. Second possibility could be that the subscriber is ahead by 15 minutes and the publisher sends data towards it. However, since subscriber thinks that timestamp has already passed, the data would be dropped as invalid data. One question does come to mind to a lot of users: which services are critical for DB replication to work fine? There are primarily three services: a Cisco DB, which is your database, a Cisco DB replicator, and DBmon service. These three are critical, and you can validate that by running a utils service list from the CLI to make sure that all the services are up. You can even validate that through RTMT to check and see if the services are up for all the nodes. Moving on, once we've identified there's a problem, how would you troubleshoot this? So the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, if I'm getting an alert in RTMT, how do I verify if replication is actually broken? Once you've verified that, what kind of commands would you use to diagnose that problem? And lastly, if you've diagnosed it and you've troubleshooted it, what kind of logs or traces would you gather and pass on to Cisco to assist further in repairing or fixing the replication issue? There's a wonderful document out there in Cisco support community, which has been referenced in the slides. I would encourage everybody to go through them. It talks a lot about architecture, how DB replication works in the background, and lastly, how to troubleshoot as well.
So the next question on my mind is, when do I run dbreplication CLI command, and which one?
Absolutely. So we've got a range of commands here. So I'm going to talk about the utils dbreplication set repl timeout. This is a command that goes unnoticed quite a few times. What this really does is it batches multiple servers into one sync process. So in other words, if you've got a cluster of 10 nodes, it would make more sense to batch all the subscribers together and then do a data sync, as opposed to having a couple of batches and going through the entire data sync process again. The default timer on this is 300 seconds. You can validate that by issuing a short-tech repl timeout command. That would specify what is the default setting at that point in time. It is encouraged that you increment that to a larger value if you've got more than 5 nodes in the cluster. Otherwise, you're likely to see that there will be multiple cycles of data sync happening between the publisher and the subscribers. Moving to the next command, it's the utils dbreplication repair. In 5.x, the legacy communication manager versions, this actually meant that it's a reset of replication, whereas in 6.x and greater versions, you would see that this is actually a repair process. What does this actually do? It actually fixes any tables which are out of sync as compared to the publisher, and effectively repairing replication, making sure all tables are healthy. You should ideally not be running this if the RTMT setting is set to 0 or a 3. You should ideally be running it only at a RTMT status of 2. A lower level command which is similar to the repair command is the utils dbreplication repair table or the repair replicate. What this is basically, if you see that you've run a utils dbreplication status and you notice there's one specific table that is out of sync. Now, instead of doing a reset or a repair for the entire cluster, it makes more sense to repair just that one table or that one replicate. So this definitely saves a lot of time and a lot of headache for the administrators. Moving on, we've got utils dbreplication stop. Now, we see a lot of users running utils dbreplication stop and doing a stop, drop, and reset, which is by far the most successful way to repair or restore replication to its healthy state. However, it unnecessarily adds a lot of time because we don't really understand what needs to be done at what time. So a stop command, ideally you'd want to run this only if the replication is not set up. The only way to recover from a stop is with a reset, unfortunately. So you want to be really careful when you use this command. Ideally, you don't want to be running this when the replication or the RTMT status is a 3, which primarily points to some sort of intra-cluster communication issues. So moving on, talking about utils dbreplication reset. Now the reset command causes replication to be torn down and then further set up. Successful completion of the process results in a RTMT status of 2. You'd ideally want to run this when you've got a RTMT status of 4, and which actually means that replication's not been set up. Do not try and run this in RTMT 3. You're only going to add a lot more time and delay in repairing the replication to its healthy state. The next command is the utils dbreplication cluster reset. Now, I think there's you'd hear this from a lot of UC engineers in Cisco. Try and avoid using this command as far as possible. What this really does is it's really a debugging command, and it's not the best command to use to repair replication and to fix it. If you do run into a replication setup failure and you run this command, what's going to happen is it's going to take a snapshot of the publisher and it's going to push it to the subscriber. However, the services would not get updated with this command. and that would cause the services to go out of sync with the data that is currently residing. Hence, a reboot of the cluster would be required. So it's definitely not the best command to use. It causes more downtime in the process. Next command would be your utils dbreplication drop admin db. I would probably run this command only if I see that the RTMT status is a 4 and it's going from 4 to 0 and then back to 4. That means your CDR or your Cisco database replicator is not being able to set up or define correctly, either on the publisher or the subscribers. So ideally you'd want to run this command when you have run into such a scenario. Then we have the utils dbreplication status. Like I mentioned before, if you want to check and see whether there are any tables out of sync, depending on the number of tables, it's going to take that much of time to actually pull that data and tell you in a file which further explains what's happening with each one of those tables. And last but not least, we've got the utils dbreplication runtime state.
So can you walk us through the runtime state output?
Absolutely. So if you actually look at the runtime state output, you can break it down into two sections broadly. The top portion is your summary text, and the bottom portion is the summary table of servers. In the top portion, which is the summary text, you will see that it defines whether the DB services are all up and running, whether a forced data sync sub was issued at any point in time. You would also see what currently it is doing and what the timestamp of the last command was. So if you run a utils dbreplication status output, it will tell you what was the time that it ran, and it will tell you which command was run last. It will then also go on to tell you at what state it is in. Has it completed that particular process yet or not? Moving further down, you would see that the location of the log file would also be printed there. It will also mention the call manager version, and lastly, the number of replicates or the number of tables that are being replicated across. The next would be the summary table of servers. Now, looking at each one of these, I'd like to just briefly talk about what they really mean. The cluster detailed view of pub, which points out in this example is 18 servers, shows how many servers are believed to be in the cluster. The next would be server name, which talks about the name of the server. The IP address, which points to the IP address of the servers. Ping, which shows how long the ping time is between these servers. The RPC, it shows if the RPC service connection, or rather the Cisco DB replicator service, is working fine or not. Replication status, it tells you whether the replication has been set up and is in connected state. If it is not, you're likely to see some various states, the other being offline, which shows that replication is not set up. REPL queue shows the replication data and the control queues. It shows it in bytes, so please remember. And you may see that if there's a specific server which has some sort of an issue, that the queue will start backing up quite a bit. Moving on, the DB version and tables, it tells you about if the pub and the subs are the same version and there's no mismatch in the versioning. The REPL loop. Now the REPL loop shows the replication dynamic real-time replication indicator, whether it's working or not. And the replication setup, last but not least, it tells you regarding the RTMT settings.
So can you explain what different RTMT states for DB replication signify?
Sure. So if you look at the slide, RTMT setting 0, primarily what that means is that the replication is still in progress. Setup is in progress still. What are the possible causes of this? If you do a reset from the CLI, or if you run this specific command called rebuild, which is a new command in call manager version 9, That's another possibility. Last is an auto recovery mode, which the call manager automatically rotates into and tries to recover from the failed state. Next would be RTMT setting 1. When do we really see this, or what does it really mean? Whether it talks about number of replicates being incorrect. That means the total number of tables that were replicated from one server to the other, or rather from the publisher to the subscriber, are not matching. A mismatched number of replicates on the publisher and subscriber is what would lead to this particular state. However, we don't see this state anymore, and this is something of the past. Haven't seen it in a couple of years now. The next RTMT setting is status 2, which is by far the best status everybody wants to notice on their RTMT and also on their runtime state output. It actually tells you that replication is set up and everything's working successfully. What would probably lead to this kind of situation if you've done a reset from the CLI and that process has completed successfully, or if the rebuild process has been initiated. The last being the auto recovery completing successfully. RTMT setting 3. Now this is highly misunderstood by the community. It's basically, it talks about an intra-cluster communication issue where the real-time replication is not occurring as it should. The possibilities, or what could you do to fix this? You'd have to run a couple of CLI commands to verify what's going on. But if you look at the runtime state output, if you notice that you see an active disconnect as the status, that would primarily tell you that the replication is down. Or if you see a drop, which means the database itself is down. I would probably go and check and see if the network connectivity is fine. So doing a utils diagnose test, utils network connectivity are very good commands to help troubleshoot such scenarios, to see if there's actually a problem with the cluster manager or a potential communication problem on certain ports. Or even if you have a firewall in your environment, that could be blocking traffic. RTMT setting 4. Now, what this really talks about is that the setup really never really occurred successfully, and it failed. The possibilities could be that there's a network connection failure or an intra-cluster communication failure. Another possibility could be that there's a timing issue where you've done a reboot and then a stop and then a reset, or something of those kind of commands which can tear down the replication or tear down the setup process. What would you do to ideally fix it? You'd have to analyze some logs. The ccm.log file would play a big role here. And probably based on what the issue is, a stop, drop, and reset would also help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, can you talk more on different replication status you can see in the runtime state output?
Absolutely. So, some of the status messages are connected, where the queue size is not going to you're likely to see it's going to be 0, or it's going to keep changing up and down, which is a healthy sign. So at this with connected status, everything's all good. There's no issues. Connecting would show that the queue size or queue is blank. There's nothing going on. That basically tells us that the connection is still being established. Next would be a status of dropped, where the queue could possibly be accumulating, which means that there's data being replicated, but that queue is not getting cleaned up. A cluster manager possibly denying access to that queue, the database service being down, or the server itself being down could be possible reasons for this. A status of disconnect, again, you would see that the queue is accumulating. And the definition here would be for this would be that the replication itself is down for the target server. The target server here being one of the subscribers. The next set of statuses are disconnected, error, failed, local, and timeout. These are statuses that you don't see anymore in the runtime state output, and we haven't seen that in several years now. A deleted and a suspended state, again, I haven't come across these in a long time. Active is a normal state, and it's a transitional kind of state as well, where it's still trying to process the state and determine what's going on. And the last but not least is a quiescent, where the queue is not going to do anything. It's going to be an NA, and this basically again is a transitional state, where you would see if you run it a couple of times, the runtime state, you would see that this would go away very quickly.
So how about shifting focus onto the latest CUCM version, that is version 9? So the question is, what are some of the database improvements that have been made which we can look forward to?
Absolutely. So Call Manager 9 is already out in the market, and some database improvements have been made, which makes life a whole lot easier for troubleshooting replication and for fixing it in the process. The first thing I want to talk about is that the force data sync sub all command has been re-engineered, and it is much faster. So what the force data sync sub actually does is it takes a backup of the publisher and restores it onto the subscriber or the subscribers if you're doing a multiple or doing a reset all for that. So in the process, what happens is it's a snapshot that's being taken or a backup from the publisher, so the services will not get updated with that. Hence a reboot is necessary, or a restart of all the services is necessary for the replication to be all good. But definitely the time taken is much less as compared to what you saw prior to 9.0. The next thing I want to talk about is the rebuild command. It is a blessing in disguise. It's a stop, drop, and reset process all bundled into one. And what that means is you save a lot of time, a lot of headache of doing this process, and it takes care of everything in an automated script. So definitely encourage you to, if you want to do this, and for a large cluster like 20 nodes, you're going to see that the time taken for the replication setup is close to 4 to 5 minutes, as opposed to something which is way more than 20 minutes prior to 9.0. Another wonderful thing is the utils db replication status command. You can now run it against a specific table or a specific replicate. Helps saving a lot of time, because the status output can take quite some time to get written to the log file. So if you know that you've got a problem with a specific table, go ahead and run this command on the specific table or the replicate, and you'll get the necessary output. The next thing on the agenda is the log collection. Now, log collection has been always tedious. Now you've got a one-stop shop to try and just go ahead and run a CLI command, which collects all the DB-related logs in one go, and you can pull that out from RTMT. The command here that's going to be used is the utils create report database. So I would encourage everyone to try and experiment with that command. Lastly, the Runtimestate CLI again. Not only is it the most critical command for monitoring the replication setup and the current status, but now it's much faster. It's a multi-threaded command, and it will not hang if there's any one server that is unreachable. So you would not have to sit there and wait for that command to come back and print out the rest of the output. It will also include the REPL timeout, the IDS server number, and also some additional CLI commands that have been added into the runtime state output. Finally, you would also see this in a historical data being written every time you run this command for RCA purposes.
Mm-hmm. So how can I speed up replication setup over a WAN? A lot of our customers do clustering over WAN, and I've seen this question coming up every now and then. So
And that's a very interesting question because DB replication can be painfully slow across the WAN if you've got a large number of clusters. What you'd really want to do is you'd really want to try and see if you can break down the replication process to only the local nodes first, and once that completes, do a second data sync to only the servers across the WAN. That does kind of save us quite some time. Another thing would be that try not to run a utils DB replication stop if you've already done a reset. What's going to happen is that this command is going to kill the data sync process which is going on, and it will leave the data in an invalid state. So what's going to happen is the next time you run a reset, it's going to take that much more time because the server is going to check each and every row and then proceed to do the data sync. So hence it causes the replication process to get extremely slow. Basically, I think if you set the set REPL timeout as well, that would also prove very useful because otherwise it's going to get broken down into multiple batches. So what you want to do is just calculate and see how much time it's taking for the replication. Or how many nodes you have in the cluster. The first 5 nodes would take approximately 1 minute to set up. 6 to 10, or the 6th node to the 10th node would probably take about 3 minutes, and anything above that would take approximately 5 minutes, I believe. So basically, just calculate that and then accordingly set REPL timeout.
Thank you. I've also seen several articles that state unified reports can prove very useful for DB replication issues. So the question is, how do I use unified reports to debug replication?
Absolutely. So the reports are very, very user friendly. They are a graphical representation of a number of root based commands that are run, which you no longer need root access to run and get the data. So my advice is that always try and get at least 3 critical reports pulled out. One is your database status report, the second is your CM cluster overview report, and the last is the database replication debug report. If you have these 3, I think you are in a very good position to try and identify where to begin the troubleshooting from and what could possibly be causing the problem.
Thank you. So now let me take some questions that our community users are asking. The first question is from Bobby Jacob, who has posted in the community. So the question is, after IP address change on a 2-node CUCM cluster, subscriber shows offline in replication status. When would this happen? Also, does the replication fall if the CUCM servers are not reachable to the DNS server?
Okay, yeah. So this goes back to one of the slides we were talking about. If the DNS server does not have the correct forward and reverse lookups entries for the servers in the cluster, you're bound to see a replication setup failure. So I think that is primarily the issue here. There are many times, like I mentioned, that you do an IP address change and you might forget or slip your mind to try and update the forward and reverse lookup entries. So definitely that's one thing that stands out and needs to be addressed for sure to fix replication.
Okay. There is another question. I mean, 2 of the users have asked it in a different manner. The question is, upon adding a new subscriber to the CUCM cluster, CCM service fails to start on its with the error Cisco Call Manager service cannot be activated or deactivated due to database update failure. And another user who has asked a similar question, upon adding a new subscriber to the CUCM cluster, symptoms observed are source has failed due to source on when I tried to run many of the unified reports. Also, the DB replication was host as a new sub was reported as not connected, and none of the DB replications commands were working.
Okay, so I think that sounds similar to a known issue. If you add or if you reset the security password on the publisher and then you proceed to add a subscriber, you're likely to run into this problem. This was prevalent in 8.0 and 8.5 versions, and you might even see that a Cisco DB service goes down along with it. So I will share more details on that in the blog. There's a known issue, and yes, you would definitely need to call into Cisco to get the necessary support for this and a workaround in place. There's a script that needs to be run to ideally get over this problem. Yeah.
Okay, I'll recommend the users to go through the blog, for the detailed information. One last question that I have again from the community. So it's from Ronin, and he says there is a 2-node 8.6 CUCM cluster across the WAN. The WAN connection went down due to a faulty router, which has been replaced now. The two servers are able to ping each other, but it seems that the pub cannot connect to the sub DB anymore. The show network cluster command shows publisher as not authenticated. Utils DB replication runtime state shows replication status as offline for both nodes, RPC and REPL. So, and the REPL, the loop shows as no for the publisher as well. So, what could be the resolution there?
Okay, so it sounds like there are a whole list of problems there. First thing that stood out, what you mentioned was that the server showed as not authenticated when you check the show network cluster output. So that primarily points to a cluster manager issue, and would need to be probably a restart of the service might help here. The server showing offline status. Now remember, if we go back to the slides, we know that the setup has not been successful, so it's in a failed state. You will see that the RTMT setting is going to toggle between 0, 4, and it's going to continue to do that because the syscdr database is not set up correctly. Now, in order to do that, you'd have to try and probably do a stop, drop, and roll. A stop, drop, and reset rather, and see if that takes care of the problem. If anything else, we definitely need to look at logs and identify where the problem really is. Could be a inter-cluster communication problem on certain ports as well. So a whole range of problems, but definitely a lot of things that can be done to try and fix it.
Excellent. Thank you, Harmit, for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Great. Hope this Tech Talk was useful to you, and we look forward to your feedback. You can send in your feedback using the comment section. You may also ask questions and collaborate via various social media channels like Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch us on YouTube, Google+, and LinkedIn. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.